Warning, incoming goblin. Warning, incoming game. You get it, it's a reboot reference.
Hey gang, and welcome back. You're probably wondering why a gameplay video is coming out on Friday, and that's because a company wanted to sponsor a video all by themselves. We'll talk more about them in a second, but first, let's look at our players. In today's video we have, excuse me, what are you doing in my video?
Hey, what about my world?
What about your world? I don't even know what you're from. You look like you're from some kid's game.
That is not true. Hero Wars has vibrant graphics, cool gameplay, and a user-friendly interface.
Huh, alright, let's give it a try.
Yeah, tell them more about it.
In Hero Wars, everyone can find a character to suit themselves. We have cyborgs, aliens, vampires, no one will be disappointed. I've been playing for 2 weeks, but have only locked a third of the characters. I'll unlock Chabin next. He's an awesome tank who literally devours his enemies. But Celeste is a real S-tier character. She can switch between a powerful DPS dark form and a healer light form, making her useful in any situation. And look at this cool new outfit that just dropped for her. There's no equal to Hero Wars. You're gonna play it on the subway, at lectures, or even while you're playing EDH. By the way, from February 13th, you can gather soul stones and skin coins for 3 amazing heroes with romantic skins that also boost their powers. Power up your team with Amira, Jorgen, and my favorite, Kiera. It's very easy to start playing, but assembling the perfect team of heroes is an art itself. For example, Mojo the Shaman can't heal Darkstar the Elf as efficiently as good as Grandmother Martha can, while the slow Cleaver makes a great pair with the Swift Isaac. Hero Wars is a world of 6 unique modes, more than 300 Guild Wars servers, and 100 million players. You can play alone, or see who among you and your friends is the top dog. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. Here's a question for you. Where can you get 30,000 coins, 600 emeralds, and 5 awesome heroes to start dominating Hero Wars right away? Too slow? The answer's in the link description below, so be sure to play Hero Wars now. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game was filmed in my studio, with Seb, Maxime, Felix, and Marie all back, bringing some hot spicy decks. Seb is playing his Yidris landfall deck, keeping Time Warp, Wooded Foothills, Regrowth, Polluted Delta, Wayfarer's Bauble, Exploration, and Command Tower. Maxime has borrowed Felix's Tayam deck, which cares about removing counters to bring back permanents, and he keeps Temple of Malady, Ashnod's Altar, Swamp, Plains, Heroic Intervention, High Market, and Final Parting. Felix is playing one of my favorite decks with Cadric, keeping Command Tower, Search for Glory, Mountain, Battlefield Forge, Atsushi, Flame Shadow Conjuring, and Zerium Golden Wind. Marie is playing her fan favorite Lulu Cultist deck, keeping a Plains, Land Tax, Sign in Blood, Adeline, Elspeth Sun's Champion, Secure the Wastes, and Emeria Angel. Maxim wins the die roll and starts us off. He draws, playing a tapped Temple of Malady. He scries 1 and bottoms it. Marie plays her Plains and casts a land tax. Felix just has a command tower. Seb has his own command tower and taps it for a green. He casts Exploration and then gets to play Wood Foothills. Maxim draws while Seb cracks his fetch to go and find a land. Max then plays a Swamp and passes. Marie gets her land tax trigger on her upkeep, finding 3 basics to put to hand. She then draws after shuffling and plays a Plains, but decides to swap it to a Swamp before casting Cultist to the Absolute. She then passes, discarding down to 7. Felix has a Mountain for turn, and passes. Seb plays a Stomping Ground, taking 2 so it comes in untapped, and an island. He's then able to power out a brutal turn 2 Yidris, and passes. Maxim plays a Plains, and pays enough for Braids. He moves to his end step, but doesn't sacrifice anything to her trigger, and passes to Marie. Marie decides to skip her land tax trigger this time around, and draws instead. She plays a Swamp as her land for turn, and passes. Felix has a Battlefield Forge for turn, and then taps 3 to cast Search for Glory. He goes to tutor for a card, revealing Bergie, and puts her to his hand, and passes to Seb. Seb draws, playing a Polluted Delta as his land for turn, and cracking it and losing 1 to find a Watery Grave. It comes in untapped, and he takes 2 more. He then swings Yidris at Maxim, dealing 5 commander damage. His spells now have Cascade, and he taps 5 to cast Time Warp, and gets to cascade before the extra turn resolves. He hits an Uro, which enters, draws him a card, puts out a forest, and gains him some life before he has to sacrifice it. Time Warp then resolves, giving Seb an extra turn. He's still got stuff to do, casting a Wayfarer's Bauble and cascading again. He reveals until he hits a Profane Tutor, which he casts and goes to tutor for a card to put to hand. He's then done after that, and moves to his extra turn. Seb draws and plays a Swamp. He casts Robe of the Archmagi, one of my favorite equipments from Baldur's Gate, and gears up Yidris with it. He then swings it at Felix this time, dealing 5 and drawing 5. Seb's second main phase then has him casting a Tuttling Geopede and gets to cascade. He reveals until he hits a Nature's Lore, and it resolves before the Geode does, letting Seb find another land to put into play. He finds a forest, and the Geode then enters. Seb then plays an island for turn, and the Geode deals 1 to his opponents. Seb then pays 2 for a Manamorphose, and gets to cascade again. This time he reveals until he hits an Astral Vision, drawing 3 cards as it resolves. He then makes 2 mana of his choice from the Manamorphose and draws as well. Seb then uses that 2 mana for an Arcane Signet and cascades yet again. This time he reveals until he hits a Wheel of Fate, but decides not to cast it and just passes. Maxim plays a Snow-Covered Swamp for turn, and then taps out for Tayam and passes. Marie goes to find a Plains from her land tax trigger, putting it to hand, and then drawing after shuffling. She plays the Plains, and then taps out for a Smuggler's Share and passes to Felix. Felix draws, and pays a red for a Faithless Looting, drawing 2 and discarding 2. He then plays a Rogue's Passage, and taps his 3 remaining mana for Jeska's Will. This makes him 7 red mana because of Seb, and he casts Burgi from his hand, and then Atsushi, and passes. During his end step, Marie gets to draw a card from the share trigger. Seb draws and goes to combat. He spreads the wealth, this time going at Marie for 5, and then draws 5 cards as his commander connects. His spells from hand now have Cascade again, and he casts Crewfix in his second main phase, cascading for the first time this turn. He hits an Oracle of Moldiah, which resolves, and Seb then casts a Mina and Den, which gets him to cascade again. This time, he reveals until he hits a Scoot Swarm. With all those spells then resolving, he plays a Forest for hand, dealing 1 to his opponents, making a Swarm token, and then plays a Homeward Path and does it all again. He's then got an island as his 3rd land for turn, before you guessed it, playing a 4th land for turn with a mountain. And each time he plays a land, he's increasing the amount of Scoot Swarms he has, and deals 1 to his opponents. Seb then casts a Rampant Growth, and cascades into a Birds of Paradise. The Rampant Growth then resolves, finding him a basic for field, and increasing his massive Scoot Swarm army, and dealing 1 to his opponents. Having made a total of 32 Scoot Swarms this turn alone, Seb decides to pass, and at the end of turn, Marie gets a treasure and draws a card from the Smuggler's Share. Maxim draws for turn and plays out High Market. He didn't draw a board wipe like he wanted to, and instead casts a Kadama's Reach. He finds a basic to hand and 1 to field. We then see a Cruel Celebrant hitting the field, and she comes in with a counter from Tayam. Moving to his end step, he sacrifices the Celebrant to Braids, and each of his opponents loses 1, while he gains 1 from the Celebrant trigger. Felix and Seb sacrifice a creature, with Felix losing Atsushi and making some treasure tokens, while Seb says goodbye to his Birds of Paradise. Marie doesn't sacrifice anything, and loses 2 life, and Maxim draws a card. Marie also gets to make another treasure, and draw a card from Maxim's turn thanks to the Smuggler's Share. Marie draws, and plays a Fabled Passage, cracking it to go and find a Plains, which comes in untapped. She pays a white for an Esper Sentinel, and then uses the rest of her mana and treasures to cast Elspeth, Sun's Champion. She decides to make some blockers with the Walker by upticking her, and once that's done, passes to Felix. Felix draws and plays a Soul Ring. He doesn't pay the Sentinel trigger, and Marie gets to draw a card. He also makes a red from Bergie, and then taps some mana to cast Cadric, making another red. He then uses some treasures to help play out Mangara of Corondor, and then pays the 1 to Cadric's trigger as it enters to make a hasty token copy of Mangara. Felix then activates the token and exiles Yidris, and passes after that. During the end of turn, Seb cracks his bauble to go and find a basic, which as it enters, deals 1 to his opponents and makes him 32 Scoot Swarm tokens. He also floats his remaining mana onto Kruphix to keep it as colorless. Seb draws, revealing Omnath off the top, but has a better play with Morag, Fury of Akum, coming in during his main phase. This likely spells the end for his opponents, and he compounds on that by casting a Reshape the Earth. This will give him 10 extra combat steps, not to mention a zillion Scoot Swarms, and his opponents know when they're done, scooping it up to Seb. And once again, big thanks to Hero Wars for sponsoring today's extra video. Game review time. So I know this one was a little bit one-sided with Seb, but I think he had the stars align or something to get that kind of great opener, and then to have the subsequent plays after that. I think the 2 critical spells this game that he cast were the Exploration, which allowed him to cast Yidris early on, and the Robes of the Archmagi, because without it, he wouldn't have been able to refill his hand as easily. As much as I love Cascade, and the fact that you get basically 2 for 1 card, you don't actually draw any cards, and so if you have no cards in hand, it doesn't help you. I like how Maxim can borrow a deck and still end up playing Braids basically. I thought that was particularly funny. Unfortunately, Tayam really didn't get to do very much this game, and what Max was hoping to draw off of any of his draws at this point for most of the game was a board wipe, which, as we saw, didn't happen. Marie learned a very valuable lesson this game, and that's that the black and white lands can often be confused for the other ones, as she ended up discarding more of her plains and swamps, which prevented her from casting Adeline on turn 3 like she wanted to. The table offered to allow her to switch 1 from the graveyard for 1 in her hand, but she wanted to learn from her mistakes, and didn't do so. I think Felix's only relevant play this game, unfortunately, with Cadric was the Mangara, and while very powerful to have 2 of those effects on the field, and being able to exile 2 permanents for only 4 mana, it was way too late by that point. The best target would have been the Scoot Swarm had Seb not had billions of lands to play the turn before and basically jumped up to 1 million of them, but sometimes that's just the way the cookie crumbles.